people some quick responses to how Christianity is not the white man's religion. But before we get into that, can you explain what people mean when they say Christianity is the white man's religion?
I think essentially what people are saying is that they want to tap into their, Africanness that they lost during the transatlantic slave trade, cast off anything they believe to be European, and given that Christianity is associated with this system of oppression that has pressed against human value of the African descendants, at the end of the day, that's really the root of what's going on. It's about, if Christianity is against my personhood, then it can't possibly be true.
That's the first reason that you got that Christianity is not the white man's religion.
Well, I say all the time on my channel, I think most people are poor historians and even worse philosophers. So I think that for me, at the end of the day, we're still suffering from what I call the Farrakhan version or the bubblegum version of the history of slavery in America. Usually it's kind of this idea that, you got the slave master beating Christianity into the slave with the Bible in one hand and a bullwhip in the other, and that's kind of the end of the story. But what's crazy is, for me, I was really grappling with this question myself, and I just, for whatever reason, felt compelled to start reading slave narratives. I wanted to hear about their experience in their own words. And so what I found was there was these statements made by people who were enslaved and, professed to be Christians about being beaten for practicing Christianity. And that stuck out to me because I was like, well, wait a minute. I thought that it was beat into them in the story. But here these folks talking about how they were praying and singing and things like that, praising the Lord in their quarters, and the slave masters were trying to prevent those kind of things. And so that's when I started to dig a little bit deeper, and I realized that actually for a large portion of, antebellum slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, actually a good number of slave masters opposed the preaching of the gospel to enslaved persons because they believed that, under English common law, that there was a possibility that if a slave converted, then they would have to be manumitted. They'd have to be set free. And they also believed that if somebody was converted, then they might think themselves as being equal with their slave master. They didn't want that either. Yeah. And so you actually have on record a great deal of slave masters saying, look, we're not going to allow the preaching of the gospel to the slaves because we don't want them to have some sort of leverage to argue for their equal personhood. We have to really acknowledge that aspect of history as we confront these kind of claims, I think.
That's right. And I did a video probably about a year, maybe a little longer ago, about the slave Bible. They took out all the chapters and stuff that would give power to slaves, and so they took all that out, and that showed that slaves were equal value and that sort of thing too. So that is actually like a historical fact too, that coexists with what you're saying as well.
Oh, without question, absolutely.
Cool. Now, what's the second reason that Christianity is not the white man's religion?
Well, the second reason I think has to do with what I call personal resistance, right? So when we think about slavery, we tend to think about just whips, chains, forced labor and that sort of thing. But I think that one thing that's actually underappreciated is the internal oppression that African enslaved persons endured. It wasn't just that, hey, we don't like you, so we're going to make you work these fields. No, there was this prominent belief that, hey, these individuals, these beings are less than human. They don't have souls. And actually, sometimes I refer to that internal oppression as that dismemberment of the soul, separating personhood from persons. So that's kind of what they were subjected to. With that being said, with conversion, this is documented by Dr. Albert Raboteau, Princeton I messed that up. Professor Emeritus in Princeton, Dr. Albert Raboteau, he documents how, this conversion to Christianity was like a reclaiming of oneself from that internal oppression, as if to say that you may have my body, but you can't have my soul. And you see that, really bleeding through in those slave narratives as they attest to, their experience. And so, it was a form of internal, basically, kind of rebellion against that
what I am saying is that many of these HBCUs, unfortunately, were not created by black people. And also, and Dr. Claude Anderson and I talked about this extensively last night. He came by to visit with his wife, Joanne, and we talked for a while. Dr. Anderson is the author of the book Powernomics. You should go check it out. And one of the things that we discussed is that he said it doesn't make any sense, and I agreed with him that many HBCUs have departments that have been entirely taken over by people who are not even African American. An example was when I went to do an interview at an HBCU in North Carolina, and I remember being stunned when they told me that the entire business school didn't have a single African American male professor. And I remember thinking, how is that possible? I mean, you serve all these African Americans. How can you not have a single African American male professor? We're out here. They exist.
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Recha Hakwadash, and double honors to the elder apostles and the bishops of Great Millstone. Honors as well to you, brethren, you fellow believers of this truth, and shalom to the elect. So anyway, I want to go into this video here. I believe this guy name is Adam Coleman, the one on the right. I believe, Salaki, if I don't know. And I forgot the other guy, but, you know, these are rebel Christians who are studied in their profession of plantation Christianity, right? And what they're trying to do is show you that, well, yeah, we see that what happened to us as blacks, and look at us, we're so-called black too, but we showing you that in the time of slavery, we converted, and it wasn't like you think it was, and so forth. So we're here to debunk that, right? At the end of the day, I'm just going to go over some history. It's real simple, right? So first off, when you go into the timeline, I did various, I've done various research on even when you go to the 1800s. The 1800s, by then, you had the slave Bible around a little bit before then, but you had the 1800s. By then, everybody was converting, and it wasn't an issue with conversion, although some didn't convert, right? But you had different classes of white people who wanted slavery, right? I mean, a different kind of slavery. They knew that, and I read this in books, right? They kind of knew, especially the evangelicals, they kind of knew that if we convert these slaves, because they would rather die than follow plantation Christianity, right? When you do the research, they were dying for that. And this is what the Jesuits was doing out of the Roman Catholic Church, which this guy, Rabbito, whatever his name is, he's a Roman Catholic. He converted to Eastern Orthodox or whatever. Looks like a tear. I don't know. But these people would rather die. So what happened, long story short, they knew our religion, understanding that before plantation Christianity, there was what you call the religion of what we followed as our, the Father Yahweh. Some of them they mixed a little bit of being Hebrew with other forms of religions. That's what our people did, right? So white supremacy, white Christianity, they said, well, this is not going to work. We need to convert these Negroes. They're wild animals. But then you cross on to the Protestants. It's kind of like Burger King and Wendy's. They both sell burgers. They both have a frame mind for something, but they have a disagreement on ingredients. So here you go to Protestants who says the hell with that, right? They're the curse of Ham, right? They're Canaan, right? So this is why you had some churches that are white Christians who will help us build churches to convert us to Christianity. But the problem is this Christianity we were following wasn't the belief that we originally was following, that God loves all. That crap. The John 3:16, God's all over the world. In fact, we didn't even know how to read. But there was a reason they told us not to read. But then we have a new translation in language, right, that we don't even understand. So now when we pick up these books, we can see it, right? Let me get a scripture before I continue back. Daniel 8:25, although his policy, and through his policy, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, right? And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. That's how he did with white plantation Christianity. You have to know, since they gave us that white Jesus, right, that everything that followed white Jesus was wrong, right? Let me give you an example. Somebody put a question here. Why did slave owners or traders feel it was necessary to convert slaves to Christianity? If slaves was considered nothing more than property, Why were their salvation important? Well, their salvation wasn't important. Do you know why when they went around and said, are you saved in the Lord? You know what that actually meant? If you believed, then you would be spared from being killed, beheaded, shot, or whatever else. You don't have to believe me. You know, you got different forms of information out here, but this all makes sense. There was a thing called forced conversion, where they forced us to read the Bible, and we didn't want to. And then they gave us the white image with it, right? Why would they do that? If these was righteous slave owners, these was righteous men, why would they give us an image of a white Jesus and tell us to follow that? So this is why we have nothing to do with this Christianity that we see today. Nothing to do with it at all. Let's go to this little article. I had other articles, but this video would take a whole 2 hours long. All you got to do is read. It tells you all that, you know? So you had Protestants and protesters. You had the evangelicals, right? Again, you had one group of Christians who was it was all for the purpose of slavery, both ends, right? We want to, in fact, they felt, let's read this article, and this will explain it. This is time, right? So I had to get a good article that was legit, so you people won't think I'm making this stuff up. How Christian slaveholders used the Bible to justify slavery, right? It says, during the period of American slavery, how did slaveholders manage to balance their religious beliefs with the cruel facts of the peculiar institution, as shown by following passages adapted by Noel Ray's new book, The Great Stain. I'm going to go on down. 1 out of more than 750,000 words in the Bible, Christian slave owners, and if asked, most slave holders would have defined themselves as Christian, right? That's telling you that. So a lot of slaveholders was Christian. How do you think they taught us the Bible? And remember, as Adam Coleman, I believe that's his name, he said they gave us the slave Bible. The other guy said that. They gave us the slave Bible. They took things out, left things out. They didn't want us to read. There was a reason for that as well. But this is how we know it was not the white man's book, because if it was, he wouldn't have had to take anything out of it, right? It says, had two favorite texts, one in the beginning of the Old Testament and the other in the New Testament. It says here, and the sons of Noah that went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Y'all should know this story. And Ham is the father of Canaan. They are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole world overspread. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted the vineyard and drank wine. In a nutshell, he became naked and whatever. And I think Ham, I'm trying to get through this. And Ham, the father, Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. So this is when the Lord said, "Cursed be Canaan," right here. "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Right? So let me go on down here. It says, despite, and this is what the KKK would have believed, right? It says, despite some problems with the story, what was so terrible about seeing Noah drunk, why cursed Canaan rather than Ham? How long was the servitude to last? Surely Ham would have been the same color of his brothers, right? So they're saying that Shem, Ham, and Japheth were all white men, right? But it goes on to say it eventually became the foundation of text for those who wanted to justify slavery on biblical grounds. In its boiled down popular version known as the curse of Canaan, curse of Ham, Canaan was dropped from the story. Ham was made black, and his descendants were made Africans. So you see that now they're saying Ham was made black, and out of Ham, everybody became black. Now we know that in Numbers 12 with Miriam, she was cursed leprous, white. So what is up with this? It didn't say anywhere that he was going to be cursed black, but they made this up. And this is what your Christian nationalists, your Protestants, the one that support Trump and all that's going on, this is all that form of Christianity. Now, as far as the evangelicals, they just wanted better slaves. They were responsible for this slave Bible too, right? They wanted controlled servants. And this is when they said, masters, obey, obey your masters. You got to come up under us. It wasn't until years later that started converting over that all mankind should be saved. But even to this day, do you realize that they're saying those people in the Holy Land are the people of God, and we got to come under them, right, to be saved? Watch. This is what they teach. This is what Christians teach. Let's go to, where we at? Jeremiah 49. And I've even heard a Christian read this, but he stopped at one particular verse, right? Jeremiah 49. Let me get the KJV. 22. It says, behold, is it Jeremiah 49, 22? Maybe it's not 22. I think it might be Isaiah 49. I'm a little off on that. Yeah, we're looking at, it's got to be Isaiah 49. Where am I at? Okay, let's go to Isaiah 49 and 22 real quick. Okay, 49 and 22. It says, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will lift up my hand to the Gentiles. Now, I was in church, and plantation Christians told me that those were the people of God. And now you got these Christians saying, we're not the people of God. Prove that we're not the people of God. We follow Jesus. They don't follow Jesus. Again, didn't the Lord say in Deuteronomy 28 and 64, thou shalt serve other gods? That Jesus that these people are following has nothing to do with the God of the God of Israel, right? And set up a standard unto the people, and they shall bring their sons in their arms, and daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. And kings shall be thy nurse and fathers, and their queens thy nurse and mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face towards the earth. Right? But they stop right here. Right? They didn't read the 23rd verse, where it says, and they shall bow down to thee with their face towards the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Yeah, they counted that out too. Let's get to Psalms 83 and 3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted thy hidden ones. Right? It says, they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. And this brings me to my next point, right? Because when you look at the Jews as an Acts, let me get that real quick. Who were the Jews? Are the Jews Christians? Or did somehow it's changed all of a sudden, and there's certain people that call themselves Jews, but everybody else is just Christian? That doesn't make any sense. When you go to the Bible and this is why they set this guy Rabbitoh, and they set all these, the HBCU who had, what's his name, Richard Humphreys. He was an abolitionist who also owned slaves, right? This is why they set these people up, to re-educate you, right? Let me read this real quick. White colleges historically contributed to the re-teaching of black culture by integrated black students. That's what they've managed to do. Acts 11 and 26. And them white colleges are owned, that's why I put that clip of that Jake, the HBCUs and those black colleges, they owned by white colleges. So they got a curriculum. The people who own those colleges are there to do what? Not let you know who the hell you are. Why would you trust an enemy like that? This man said he went to college and there wasn't even no black professors in there. The NAACP is owned by white people and followed white people, right? And set up as with white people, so-called. Right. That Viacom, owned by the Redstone family. Yeah. So you really think they're going to tell you that guy Richard Bilko, Steve Bilko, Salakia, the one that started the Black Conscious Movement that Sam Netter's in? Do you know who he was set up by? He was set up by these so-called white leaders, abolitionists too, and he was a Roman Catholic. Anyway, Acts 11:26. And when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch, and it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people disciples. And all the disciples, and the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So one of these disciples Jews? So how do we get a separation between Jew and Christian? Because this was the separation between Jew and Gentile, Jew and Greek. These were still Jews, but they was practicing of different cultures, right? They was practicing different philosophies and doctrines. Those people that came over here on the slave ships, right? They would have been considered Gentiles, not because of the practice of not knowing the Bible, but because they adopted themselves in other forms of beliefs. And you had another people who stole our identity and then set it up that we needed to be converted to Jesus. And that way it was very diabolical, but it worked. So naturally we were kind of like Gentiles, but we were still Jews that just didn't understand the truth. Some of us were still following like the Old Testament mindset. Some of us believed in the Messiah too. So the crazy part came when they said, no, you're not going to follow that Jesus. You're not going to follow that black Messiah, right? And there's history on that they were following the Bible, the Torah and everything. There's proof on that. The African slaves was already following that. So what the hell is up with this translation, man? And how they took everything out and lied to us. And the Lord allowed that for us to wake up. Colossians 2:8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deception, deceit, after the tradition of men and the rudiments of the world, and not after the Messiah. Right? So we know Jeremiah 9:5, and they will deceive everyone his neighbor and will not speak the truth. And this is what these black Christians and pastors are doing, man. They have taught their tongue to speak lies and wearied themselves to commit iniquity. The Lord said he ain't dealt so with any other nation. Psalms 147, I believe in 18:19. But these pastors, these preachers, they want to keep that white plantation Christianity going. We have no business following that. And you got to know if white Jesus was a lie and everything else that came with it. And another problem I have, all these years, right, we was following that white Jesus in those white sepulchre of churches. Remember those dances that they allowed us to do? We were already doing that. That praise break and crap that they do now, we was doing that long before plantation Christianity. And the slave owners allowed us to incorporate that in this plantation Christianity. And a lot of us was in the heathenistic practices, doing those praise breaks and dances, and they were singing the Yah. They would say Yah, right? They were singing, but they also linked it and merged it to other customs of cultures. Remember, they was in Africa. I mean, it goes deep. But the Christianity that we're following today had nothing to do with following belief system that we had in place before. Remember, this is why they whipped us into it. What were we following before that? We didn't identify with white Jesus. In fact, the node was so screwed up, they had to put the white Jesus up to say, this is your new God. Right? And then you had the evangelicals who had no problem with that, as long as we worshiped our master. And then what these Christians will do, they'll go into the history of the 1800s. Well, by the 1800s, we were still being converted, whipped. Some of us converted on their own willingly. And you didn't just get freed because you became a Christian. I don't know where you get that from. You had, they gave you like amenities. You were showing yourself to be, subtle and humbled. The same thing with the HBCU. That's why they started giving us certificates and awards. This is why you get those degrees and those certificates and awards. That was representing you being converted and not exactly going into your own history. This is why I despise Black History Month. Black History Month don't tell you real black history. They set up Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and all the rest of them. That's all a joke. Their whole job, according to modern media, was to fight for our civil rights. Well, why are we fighting for civil rights?
right? Because that means that there's something wrong. But what about the history before that? Before the 1600s, man? What were we? Not some damn African kings in the goddamn jungle. We were the biblical Israelites.